While the country continues to see the worst year of load shedding on record, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan is now looking to restructure the Eskom board. He met with the current board members yesterday amid calls for Eskom management to be sacked. Experts have recommended that the utilities executives be made of upskilled, or rather be made up of skilled personnel, including engineers, people with technical know-how. So for more on this, we're joined now by Ronny Mkhwanazi, who has served on some state boards of SOEs. He's also a corporate lawyer. And we also have former SCOPA Chairperson Themba Godi. To both of our guests, a warm welcome to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Ronny, I want to kick the discussion off with you this morning because some of the coverage, some reaction to that announcement by Pravin Gordhan about a reshuffle which is in the works talks about it being like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. What do you make of it?
Look, I think, firstly, thank you for having me so early in the morning, and to the viewers at home as well. But I think, look, there's nothing strange with the reshuffling of the board. I think the minister yesterday, in fact, produced a statement where he, I think, was clarifying his intentions. And what the minister said in the statement was that the board's time had already lapsed in terms of, the SOC governance frameworks. Boards are appointed for a period of about 3 years. Mm-hmm. And the board's period actually expired in 2021, according to the minister. And now the minister has decided to reconstitute the board. So it's not a firing of the board necessarily, but yes, it is the prerogative of the shareholder to change the board, especially when the board's term has expired. But I think what's important is the manner in which it's going to be done. Because sometimes, the shareholder runs a risk of out of a reaction just to appoint a completely new board. But that has shown over the past years to be a weakness, because if you do a wholesale changing of the board, you end up having a new board who has to start from the bottom again to get to grips with what the issues in the organization are, and then think of ways to execute. So it would be important for the minister in reconstituting the board to ensure that there's also some skills that are retained for continuity purposes. And for purposes of efficiency going forward.
No, certainly. I mean, Themba Godi, nothing strange, Ronny Mkhwanazi tells us. But I suppose the question that people will have this morning, given that we are on day 113 of load shedding for this year, is what good will a board shakeup do now if indeed it's not about getting people with the right skills, engineers, onto the board of Eskom?
No, very true. What the minister intends to do does not seem to be a response to the crisis that the country is facing. He seems to be fiddling whilst Rome is burning. And it's even worse, the fact that the time for the board had long elapsed and it was just renewed. So the changes that he is announcing have nothing to do with a response to the crisis that the country is facing. It is your business as usual kind of thing, even worse than that, because we have a board that has not been able to deliver on its mandate together with its executive. And it seems that there is no action in response to this continued failure. Look, the current board does not have people with skills related to the industry that Eskom is in. And if you look at the energy availability factor of Eskom, when they came in, it was around 70%. It has gone down to around 56%. So you are talking about a board that has failed, and yet you have kept them beyond their duration. So, and last week we had almost the worst week in terms of blackouts. And all you come back with is, well, I'm thinking of reshuffling the board. And so, yes, from a legal point of view, as Mr. Mkhwanazi has said, yeah, it is their prerogative, that's what it's doing. But to the nation, they are anxiously waiting for a substantive response to the punishing blackouts that the country has been subjected to.
Yeah, absolutely. The country buckling through its worst year of energy availability to date. I mean, Ronny, you've been on several boards of SOEs. Perhaps you can give us a sense of the inner workings and how boards of particular SOEs should be constituted. For Eskom, we know that expertise is incredibly specific. We look at the chairperson of the board, Professor Malekapuru Makgoba, who is a medical professional, and by no means are we diminishing his own qualification. But in a situation of Eskom, the energy provider of the country, what role would a board chairperson with a medical background play there? The CFO as well is a money man. He's not an engineer. I'm talking about Khalib Kasim. How does it work?
The idea behind the board is, firstly, let's understand what the board does. So the board provides strategic direction to the organization and is not necessarily operationally involved in how the organization should be managed. So the idea is therefore that you need to constitute your board in such a way that you have a diversity of skills and, of course, what we call horses for courses, to make sure that you have the right people with the right skills for the right industry and of course, for the right board. Because what happens, for example, currently is that the appointment of the boards of SOCs is the domain of the shareholder ministry and, of course, the minister who is the representative of that shareholder. So that creates a challenge because we've seen, and it's also been confirmed at the Zondo Commission, that the appointment of boards were almost, done in a haphazard manner. It's about who the minister likes and who will listen to him, and that is the basis upon which, boards in the SOCs are currently contained. And in fact, even during the Presidential Review Commission on SOCs, one of the recommendations that was made was that we need to effectively set up, firstly, a shareholder unit within the state, where all SOCs, for example, will be discussed and which will also be responsible for the recruitment, vetting, and training of board members to be assigned to the various state-owned companies. And of course, I've seen lately, and you're right, I've sat on a few SOC boards, and there's a great temptation to appoint many lawyers to these boards. And I suppose that's because, there's a huge emphasis on governance. But that in itself is a mistake, because you don't want a board that is only composed of lawyers in an industry, for example, that is, say, in the case of Eskom, in engineering, electrical engineering environment. So yes, you do need, a chairperson, for example, who may not come from the industry. But what it does mean is that you should then set that off with other skills on the board of people who are actually from the industry and have skin in the game, so to speak, and can add technical. Because remember, the discussions that a company has is not purely operational. You have, technical, financial, and operational, functions that a company has. And the board should be composed in such a manner to ensure that you actually have all of those elements composed. So I think unless and until we go to reviewing the framework of how boards are appointed to SOCs, we will remain with the challenges that we currently see with the boards we have.
And perhaps Eskom, Ronny, has unique problems. I mean, everything that you've just told us about how a board is constituted at an SOE, I mean, that might be broadly speaking, but for Eskom, given the crisis that we are in, surely that needs to change, and it needs to be more than just strategic direction.
No, absolutely. I mean, I heard the Minister of Finance yesterday saying that, the country spent over 230 billion between 2019 and now, just on Eskom alone. I think they said 230 billion specifically on Eskom. And the minister actually went on to say, and we still don't have lights. So yes, that it's absolutely critical, especially in entities that are highly technical by nature, like Eskom. And currently, in fact, I don't know if you know this, but I mean, most board members of Eskom who were initially appointed to the board had since stepped down, and the board is literally sitting at about 50% of capacity or so. From the 13 that is supposed to be appointed, I think there's about 6 or so board members remaining. So it is indeed a very urgent, solution that is required in terms of capacitating the board and making sure you have the right people.
I mean, the other question, Themba Godi, is who would want the job of being part of the Eskom board in the context that we are in at the moment, the crisis we're facing at the moment?
Well, I can assure you there are many patriotic South Africans who will lap up to do the job, because from where I'm seated, the problems are not as huge as they are made out to be. Eskom does have theoretically the capacity to provide us with electricity. The only thing, it's getting the power stations to be functional. Mm-hmm. You'll recall that some 2 weeks ago at a press conference, the COO of Eskom said that Eskom is unable to get what it wants from maintenance, meaning that their quality assurance processes are not robust enough to make sure that when maintenance is done, it is of the right quality and it is able to deliver what we need. Like you were saying, you have a CEO who is a lawyer and whose track record from NAMPAC to Sasol has been dismal and has been made to come and run an institution that in itself was somewhat struggling. So the issue here around personnel, it's not that we are running short of personnel or we can't get people who are not qualified or are not willing to serve the nation. It is just that the political decisions taken to appoint people who have no skills relevant to Eskom and the policy trajectory of saying the best and the only solution is to go renewables, even in the face of the utter failure of renewables to save Europe from an energy crisis. We are the ones who now want to import that technology and want to use it as the basis for solving our energy crisis. So we have a mixture of policy misdirection as well as the inability to manage. Because like Mr. Mkhwanazi was saying, how does a board that knows very little about the industry give strategic direction to Eskom? So it is the choices that were made by government. And yet it came on the ticket that there is state capture where skills were denuded. They want to do things the right way. And what they do, they appoint people who are, so to speak, illiterate in relation to the field that they're supposed to manage.
Yeah, certainly. And we know that the Eskom crisis is so closely linked to the parallel crisis in our country, our unemployment rate and attracting investment as well. Let me thank both of our guests for your time this morning. Themba Godi, former SCOPA Chairperson, and Ronny Mkhwanazi is a corporate and international trade lawyer. In fact, he served on some boards in SOEs. Thanks very much indeed.